Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. Excited today to be joined by Chris Stakich, Chief Community Officer at CEO Coaching International. Chris, you and I had a great conversation recently. We have been bit by the same bug, the travel bug. You've had some incredible experiences in your career, being the Chief Experience Officer at YPO and overseeing a ton of global events. How'd this all start? What's your once upon a time?
So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in a middle class family, and as a kid, we didn't really have much money to travel. And by the time I got to college, I had an opportunity to study abroad as a junior when I was in college, and I went to Australia. And for me, it was a completely life-changing experience. And I think a lot of that had to do with, growing up in America as a kid. I was, on that classic American treadmill where I was, trying to get good grades and playing tons of sports and, was the captain of every sports team and trying to win all the awards. And I ended up going to Harvard University, which was a great accomplishment for myself and sort of where I came from. And when I went to travel abroad in Australia, I just realized that there are actually different ways to live on this planet, different ways to think about what's important and different sets of values. And that really surprised me. And there was this saying in Australia there, the people there, they work to live versus they live to work. And that really stuck with me. And when I graduated from Harvard University, I decided, I wanted to take a year and travel around the rest of this world and learn about different other cultures and different religions and different, cultures and the music people listen to. And I didn't have any money. And so I started working for a travel company, and they sent me to Costa Rica to open the country for the company. And we had great success that first summer. I ended up working for that company from 2002 to 2019. And we would take high school students all over the world. We grew the company from supporting about 200 students a year to 12,000 students a year. And during that time, I had the chance to live and work in about 55 countries around the world.
Amazing. I just returned from a trip to India, and I really had my mind and eyes open to the differences outside of what we live in America. I love your contrast about the Australian insight, living to work versus working to live. What else are you seeing or have you seen between the mindset in the West, or specifically in the US, compared to other parts of the world that you think are worth putting a spotlight on, that there might be something there to learn from?
Yeah, let me give an analogy of what I've seen. So as I mentioned, we had high school students traveling with us from typically the top 1% of America, New York City, Los Angeles, from, the oil families of Texas, very wealthy students who were going to the best prep schools and going to the best colleges. And we'd take them to, remote Cambodia, and they'd be living in a village that does not have flush toilets, that does not have hot water. And it would just open up their hearts and open up their minds. And, 2 weeks later, the students would be crying. They did not want to go back to their $25 million compound in Beverly Hills. And, that really surprised me. And what I learned from that was, America is a very hardworking country, and we prioritize accomplishment and sort of forward progress. And in a lot of these countries, they have a much bigger focus on family and connection and friends, playing sports, soccer on Sunday afternoons and family barbecues. There's a lot more heartfelt connection. And maybe that's because they didn't have the opportunity of having the money and means that we do to do all kinds of exciting and crazy things. But in a lot of countries, I found that there was a priority to family relationships, connection, leisure and sport, that has, I think, continued to decrease here in America.
We help families discover what we call true wealth, which is life beyond the financial numbers and how much is in the brokerage accounts. And it's really about living with purpose, having a sense of fulfillment. What gets in the way of people being able to do that from your experience?
Yeah, I think that people feel, a lot of expectation on their shoulders here in America. It's a very fast moving planet we live on and country we live in. And through social media and, being bombarded, seeing what your peer group is accomplishing and, what everyone's doing on a, daily, weekly, monthly basis. I think there's this internal, feeling that, I need to be doing that too. I need to be optimizing every second of every single day. We may have over optimized in America in the sort of the hard charging business world and, just trying to squeeze a little too much juice out of every single moment of every single day. And in turn, missing these magical moments. Last night, I have three sons, a 13, 11, and 9-year-old. Best night in the world. It was me and my three sons. We had music playing and we're just, cooking up burgers on the grill and, hanging out, just the four of us talking about, what's going on in their lives and the dance they have going on this Friday. And there is a portion of America that I think is pushing it too hard and charging it too hard and, trying to overly optimize where they're missing some of these moments when you slow down and connect with other people.
So for the entrepreneur, the business owner, the executive, the person who says, hey, I need to climb this mountain and I'm good at it. What advice or insight would you give to that person? How do they slow down a little bit?
I think there's two thoughts that come to mind for me. The first one is, there was a time for that early in our life and early in our career. I would definitely say, between when I got out of college and I got married and had children, I wasn't married and didn't have children. So I had a lot more time and I had a lot more focus and, really built up my professional resume and just poured so much, time and heartfelt energy into the travel company and what I was focused on at the time. I don't think that's the fulfilling path, once you have a wife and once you have children and, as you get older and get a bit wiser and you go from more of being the individual contributor to a little bit more of the coach and the manager and the wise elder. And so, one of my recommendations, there's a great book called From Strength to Strength. I believe it was written by Arthur Brooks. It really talks about these stages in life and, understanding what stage you're at in your 20s versus your 30s versus your 40s versus your 50s. For people who come from a background of high accomplishment, it's really hard to get older because you're not the star, you're not the contributor, the producer, the main person on the field. You become, you naturally become more of a coach and an elder. And I think it's important that people realize the phases we go through in life and get comfortable, with our natural evolution.
That's great insight. I've learned that, especially with the topic of children, if listeners have children, they know that children have busy lives. And then when you're consumed in your own busy life, you always have or frequently have the intention to say, well, down the road, when things slow down, I really want to spend time with my kids. And so maybe entrepreneurs have liquidity events or people retire and they're like, hey, I'm going to spend time with my kids. But guess what? The kids have an incredibly busy life and it's hard to really integrate into their lives, especially in the stage that we've all come from, where we've been working on growing. So the challenge is to have awareness about where those pockets of time are that can be really captured. I know for our family, my wife and I, our kids are out of college, and our wife and I are in the empty nest phase, but we've been enjoying more family conversations around different topics. And every time that we get together for dinner together, kind of forum style, I throw a question on the table that everyone goes around the table and answers, what are you most proud of? Or what are some of the challenges that you see ahead? And just to get everyone to tune into answering a single question brings more of a unity and awareness about what's going on in each other's lives.
Yes.
Now, in your journey, you've had some people that have influenced you in some moments in life that were more defining than others. Can you unpack a couple of those categories for us?
I would start with my own parents and my sister. I have a very tight family unit. And I grew up in a household with a lot of love and a lot of support and a lot of connection, but we didn't have a lot of money. And so at a young age, in hindsight, it makes sense to me that you sort of neglect what you have and sort of want what you don't have. And so, because I had that, and I assumed everyone had, very loving parents who spent a ton of time with them. However, I basically got recruited to go play football at an all boys prep school in our city. And I went from this much, lower middle class neighborhood to this prep school. And I saw all these people that had tons of money and families with buildings named after them. And I'd go visit their house, and there was like an East Wing and a West Wing. And, I really aspired for that at 14 and 15 and 16, 17. I mean, it looked amazing. As I started working for the travel company, we would visit the homes of our clients. And again, massive compounds in Beverly Hills, or people that own an entire floor of a building in Manhattan. And I also saw the dysfunction that can, just because people don't have money, just because people have money doesn't mean that the rest of their life is working out correctly. And I saw a lot of the dysfunction between the parents and between the children and parents. We had a lot of kids that would come on our programs where you could just really feel, the lack of connection they had with their parents. And it made me sad. And so I think I had a lot of external viewpoints into different types of families. And I knew that when I had my own children, I wanted to, and we do the exact same thing you're talking about, Nathan. My wife is a chef, and dinner time is like a sacred moment. It's like we are all five at the dinner table, minimum 1 hour, only one discussion going on, no phones allowed. And I truly believe that the compounding moments of that with my own children will build them to be strong, contributors to society.
That's excellent. You're practicing what you preach. For listeners, I encourage you to go to our website, planningalt.com, and take our True Wealth assessment. And we aspire to believe that true wealth has nothing to do with money. And it's about identifying those moments in life, whether it's at the dinner table, whether it's meaningful times in nature, or creating shared experiences, building community. That's what matters. And that's what is we call true wealth. So Chris, at this stage, what is your true wealth zone? What really energizes you at this moment? And what are you looking forward to?
On the true wealth side, there's two things that come to mind. The first one is sort of like the story I mentioned, the time I spent with my son last night. But really we ski on the weekends in the wintertime. We do summer sports in the summer. But every single weekend is an adventure with the kids. And there's something magical about skiing with, my three sons, where, we get to the top of the hill and we all have our own little crazy ride down, our own crazy adventure that we're in control of. And then we get on the lift, and there's just, there's 45 seconds to a minute and a half to tell the worst stories and, reconnect. And I love that moment. They're sort of trapped on the chairlift with me. And we get to talk about things. And again, at 13, 11, and 9, they're just in a very special spot. And so to me, it's true wealth there, true wealth. And, some like camping and hiking and boating adventures we take. Yeah. And I know that, time is limited with them. It's really surprising that, at 13 years old, I have 5 more real years with my son where he heads out into the world. And so at this stage of my life, that's what true wealth means. I do think as, I become an empty nester, I think my own priorities will shift, and there will be a new definition for that true wealth, which I think is great. It's, it's living and growing and evolving and sort of a new chapter. And I look forward to that as well.
How do you guide people to be more community aware? Because sometimes we say, oh, well, I'm busy and I'll give some money to charity, so I'm involved in the community. But what we're talking about today is connecting one-on-one,
Yeah.
creating shared experiences that are meaningful. What advice would you give to someone who is curious about leaning in that direction?
Yeah. Nathan, I think what you mentioned, most things in community need some type of financial support. And so the funding is great. That is a role and that is a contribution. What I've found personally, and this actually has happened just over the last couple of years, is trying to figure out where in my community I actually want to commit time, because time is the most important thing, it's the most valuable thing. And how am I going to create connections with people that, are meaningful and helpful for me, but ideally meaningful and helpful on their own life journey. For me, where that's really happened, I played football in college and in high school and sort of my whole life. My kids also play Pop Warner football, the different age groups here. And I'm the head coach of our U12 football team, which sounds sort of funny. However, it's like one of the most important things in my life because I have built-in time, 2.5 hours every single day for 3.5 to 4 months, where I'm actually working with like 35 young men who are the same age as my 13-year-old son, who come from all kinds of different family backgrounds, and I can sense, what they need to complement what they're getting at home. And I have the chance to like work with my own son and his whole friend group on how to be a better person on this planet. And I tell them right off the bat, I say, hey guys, I can promise you 3 things. Number one, I'm definitely going to teach you to be a better football player. Like I played football my whole life. I know this sport inside and out, and we're going to get to it. Number two, I'm going to teach you how to be a better athlete. And so beyond the sport of football, just like, being a good basketball player, skier, your whole life, how to be flexible and strong and feel good and strong inside your body. But most importantly, I'm going to teach you how to be like a good young man on this planet, and our planet needs it. And, through the sport of football, we're going to work through the types of things that happen outside of football as well. And so that's where I've found my own sweet spot to like give back in a way that I believe in and think will be impactful and scalable. And I think for everyone, they should think about what is fun for them, in which ways do they want to give back to the community they would look forward to.
I think there's something in that word fun that has an energy to it. And oftentimes we can live in our head or we live in our busy schedule and let our calendar or email chains dictate what we do next. But it's about what energizes you. Where do you come to life? And then how can you connect in a meaningful way with others to share that experience? So final question, looking back, what advice would you give to a 20-year-old Chris, knowing what you know now? You've shared some great insights.
So for like literally my 20-year-old self, I would have just taught myself to set aside 10 to 20% of all the money I made over life and just stick it in the S&P 500 in a Roth IRA. Sounds really simple, but I wish someone told me that. I'll be 45 years old. Be the very simple lesson. I would say more broadly, and you asked the question of like what I look forward to. In the background, I've sort of been building up the different lessons I've learned in life. And what I think is important to build is a foundation for kids. And then what I think is important to equip them with, it's like cutting edge and happening right now. And, I love school systems. I adore the teachers and principals and the people committed to that. I think it's very hard for schools to holistically prepare kids for what they're going to enter, 2030 and 35 and 40. It's a very fast transforming world. And so I'm building my own sort of, again, complementary curriculum for youth. And it's from a foundational perspective, how to build wealth, how to manage your health, how to manage your own mental psychology, how to build healthy relationships with people. These foundational pillars I believe in that lead to a great life. And then on the other side of that spectrum, what I'm literally working with when my kids come home from school is I have them doing a variety of crazy projects on ChatGPT and creating their own songs on AI and like they're just learning how these tools work. And I think that them understanding how those tools work is like saying, hey, it's great to be a software engineer or, understand how to create financial models. So what I look forward to really in the future, and what I'd like to tell, other kids that are, 20 years and 30 years younger than me is, understand how to build the pillars for success, and there's a couple key areas, understand those principles. And then in addition, really understand how the world is transforming on the most front cutting edge, and don't be scared, be willing to participate. It's new for everyone. Be willing to dive in and just understand the technology and where we're heading.
That's fantastic insight, Chris. It's been a pleasure spending time in the metaphorical canoe with you today.
Yeah.
And look forward to staying in touch.
Do it again, Nathan. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.